Welcome all, I'm joined by Patrick Elliott, the director and co-founder of IBCCS Tax Armenia. We'll be discussing investment opportunities in Armenia and how to better attract foreign investors to the country. So Patrick, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
So to start off, you recently founded a company, IBCCS Tax Armenia. Can you tell us about the company? What is it trying to achieve? And just a little more about this achievement.
Sure, I'm actually the co-founder, but the regional director of the Armenia branch. The owner is a friend and now partner of mine. It was founded in Cyprus, actually, and they have branches in Estonia and Georgia. And so I convinced my friend to come and visit Armenia, and it took him 2 trips to see the potential and decide, okay, we need to open an office here. What we specialize in ultimately is helping move businesses, entrepreneurship, and talent to certain jurisdictions that are advantageous for businesses and for tax purposes and so on. So obviously right now a big influx of Russians, a lot of Ukrainians as well, who want to establish businesses in Armenia because they see the advantages of this place. And so we would be facilitating that, doing a lot of the legal setup and the registration and dealing with the local authorities to ensure that it's a smooth transition here.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of these foreigners, do they find a tax regime in Armenia attractive for doing business? What do they think of how that all works?
Well, it's actually interesting because most people don't know about the tax regime in Armenia, right? So at first they're like, Armenia, why Armenia? And then when you give them all the reasons, they start to go, wow, I actually didn't know this at all. Right. So, for instance, even this morning, I had a meeting with someone she's a director she does something similar that we do, but in Dubai. And some of her clients have started asking her about Armenia. So she asked me, what are the advantages? And I told her the basic stuff, right? I mean, it took us, I actually timed this as a test. It took me 9 minutes, start to finish, to register my ADZE, my individual entrepreneurship. There's nothing like this in any other country. We went to then register the LLC, the IBCCS Tax. That took exactly 20 minutes. There was no capital needed. There was no state fees. You know, my partner had the papers in his hand. He's like, okay, now what next? I said, what do you mean, what next? We're live. And he goes, what? That's crazy. So from a bureaucratic standpoint, things are improving dramatically. From tax purposes, again, there's if you're making under 240,000 US, you just pay a 5% flat tax, like cumulative over everything, which makes it extremely simple, extremely easy to also plan how much you have to pay at the end of the year. As you know, the IT regime, right, for a lot of companies, they pay 0 tax. Now with all the companies coming in, they added, from what I understood, they're actually expanding this a lot more. So a lot of ancillary services that are related to IT, things like, I'm just guessing here because I didn't they didn't announce the exact laws yet, but the ancillary services, which I'm assuming will be things like UX design, graphic design, coding, that kind of stuff that's related to IT will also now fall under that tax bracket. So for more creative types and so on, these are massive advantages. Cost of living, cost of employment. So there are tremendous advantages. And I think that part of what I want to be doing with IBCCS Tax Armenia is not only bring people here, but help contribute to the brand of Armenia as a place where you come to do business, right? We have our neighbor to the north that is a gorgeous country, and in many ways on par with us. They have great wines, they have beautiful mountains, they have the sea though. They have a lot of stuff that we don't have, a lot of advantages that we don't, and that's okay. Right, so the idea is where can we find our competitive advantage, and I do believe that it's from a business standpoint. Is that go party in Tbilisi, but the place to do business, the place to come and get rich, the place to hire talent. Especially we have Syrians and Lebanese coming who speak almost American English. They speak Arabic, so you can deal with the Arab world easily. A lot of them speak French. You have French Armenians, Russian Armenians. So the diversity of languages, the diversity of talent. This is the place to be. So the point is to really put it on the map as the place in the Caucasus to come and do business, right?
So in terms of Armenia's investment environment, there have been some positive developments recently. For example, tech giant NVIDIA announced that it will open an office in Armenia. New airline routes have started operating, new business spaces like Hard Rock Cafe even. But what's interesting is that after the COVID-19 pandemic and the Second Karabakh War, many thought that it would be a longer road to recovery, and this is even going by the forecasts of the central bank and the economy ministry. How would you assess right now Armenia's economic situation, but especially pertaining to investment and investor confidence?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm in the private sector. I'm not in the public sector. So I'm sure there's a lot of let's say bureaucratic mechanisms that I'm not aware of. There's yeah, for me it's not even something that's on my radar because I'm not interested in that. What I find that's really interesting about Armenia in particular, and why I'm so hopeful about this place, is that Armenia's growth is bottom up. It's not a top-down initiative. It's not social engineering. It's genuinely within the people themselves. And I think that you mentioned, COVID, the Karabakh War, and of course, I mean, even this might seem inconsequential, but even the cigarette ban recently, right? Like these, I find are tests for our country, and I find that Armenia has been bucking trends in that it's actually shooting past these tests with flying colors. Now, these are extreme challenges, and the war is not something to be celebrated in no way, shape, or form. It's something extremely painful for us. But it's a catalyst for us to reimagine what we want the future of this country to look like, what we want the values of Armenianness to be. And for me, I mean, after the trauma of the war, actually, I'm not a citizen, so I'll say the Armenian citizens, despite what everyone predicted, everyone thought would happen, they lined up calmly, they wrote on a piece of paper who they want to represent them, and they went back to their lives and moving forward, right? I've seen since then an influx of diasporans who are coming here because they care about this country and they want to make it a better place. So the trend is upward in this sense, right? And I think that sends a massive message to foreign investors that since the change is not cosmetic, it's not a skin deep change, right? It's going into the marrow of Armenianness. And part of that has to do with a lot of our business traditions, right? One of the great books that I like to quote is Thomas Sowell's Black Rednecks and White Liberals. He's got an entire chapter on what he calls middlemen minorities. These are minorities who are always successful everywhere except their home country. So he talks about, of course, the Jews in Europe, he talks about the Lebanese in Africa, he talks about the Chinese in South Asia, and the Armenians. And it's interesting to me that the reason that the reason that these minorities are able to succeed, he does a better job explaining in this book though, a lot of these cultural elements, we have them in Armenia. We've always had them. The reason that there hasn't been this explosion of prosperity that we're seeing now only recently is because, as you know, before it was choked. You can't have a top-down heavy hand and have economic prosperity. The two don't go together. So this breathing room that we now have, even though the situation is dire, even though things are still rocky and unsettled, I think passing that test was a major sign to the rest of the world that, hey, we're serious. Okay, we have the business acumen. We've proven our stripes in every single country we've settled in, and now we're creating this bastion of excellence and prosperity in the middle of the Caucasus in a remote region. So doing so, I think, is just, it's a massive advantage for us. I think that culturally, the culture is there. Let's put it that way. The culture is there. And this is going to be a momentum thing. It's going to keep going up and up. It's like a compounding thing. So we had the setbacks of COVID and the war. But again, the cigarette ban, that example, right? None of us thought that anyone would ever respect it. And yet for some odd reason, literally the next day that it passed, I haven't seen a single person smoking indoors, not one. I mean, these are very interesting things. It's that there's a will here. There's a will for change. There's a will to adapt and go, okay, let's move forward. And it's really cool. It's a cool time to be in Armenia.
But also Armenia sees these unexpected developments which also change things in terms of the economic sphere. One of them being the influx of Russians, Belarusians and Ukrainians since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Many companies have been registered, far more than were registered in 2021. The services sector is flourishing, but there are also negatives. The inflation rate has gone up a lot. Flight routes, in a way, have been disturbed by this, and gentrification has also become a problem. Many of the Armenian people that have lived in Yerevan's central districts for generations are now being pushed out. In terms of this phenomenon, again, pertaining to the economic and investor sphere, do you see it as an opportunity or do you see it as a challenge?
Why not both? I believe there's always going to be challenges, especially when you have a period of transition, which is what we're in. I'm very Taoist in my outlook. is that I don't believe that the world is orderly. It's actually always chaos, but that's a good thing because it's a sign of life, right? Orderliness is usually it's going to end to stagnation, right? When everything is formalized, systematized, you don't have innovation, you don't have a push forward. So again, a lot of people see this as crises. And I see this spoken again in diasporan circles, right? Where Armenians, we need to be united right now. But usually when you're saying we need to be united, what does that mean? No one knows, no one's actually stopping and asking. Usually what it means is you have to agree with me. You have to shut up, keep your opinion, and agree with me because we're in a dire situation. I think this is a beautiful time because now we get to bounce these ideas off like we're doing right now in this session we're having. But we get to decide what kind of future we want this place to look like. We get to reevaluate and re-examine what it means to be Armenian in the 21st century. Sorry. We get to decide what our own values are. What do we want for ourselves, for our loved ones, for our family, for our homeland? All of these things need to be reevaluated. And it's the opportune moment to do so. So having these new Russians coming in, look, the flight paths, there's nothing I can do about the fact that Russia decided on a whim to invade Ukraine. However, the fact that we have this influx of foreign talent, and I do want to stress foreign, I think it's important because I use Estonia as an example a lot. It's an EU country, and it's within close proximity to Finland, Sweden, Denmark, Germany, Poland. So these are all economic powerhouses. And you want to surround yourself with new ideas. And unfortunately, our isolation has been what's been hurting us. And we always thought the diaspora would fill that gap. There hasn't been this serious diasporan involvement the way we envisaged, right? This whole saying, the diaspora is our oil. We saw what that really means. It didn't come to any real fruition. And that's okay. It's time to reevaluate these things, including our failures, and be honest about them. But having this influx, it's a good thing. In terms of gentrification, generally what ends up happening, and this is kind of a small aside tangent, we don't really need to talk about policy, but it's usually what's going to end up happening is if the housing policies are properly done, the supply will end up catching up to the demand. The demand, yes, right now it's quite tight. However, remember we have like a couple 100,000 people who left Armenia in the last 30 years. You're going to tell me there's not tons of available properties. There are, and as they start coming onto the market, as more people start renovating apartments and putting them to rent, the prices then tend to go down. But yeah, overall, look, these are things that are outside of my control. I'm not going to pretend that I understand them at an extremely deep level. All I think is that having this influx, these new ideas, these talented people. A friend of mine's restaurant was about to go bust until these Russians started coming in. So there you go. There's one Armenian, actually not one, the owner, the cook, the cleaning crew, all these ancillary benefits. My masseuse is a blind, he's a wonderful masseuse. He's blind when he comes to your house and so on. And he said that since the Russians have come, he's had consistent business, which he's almost never had in his life. So he's super happy. Only good can come of more people coming here, bringing their skill set, bringing their new mindsets. I only see the positives.
Would you describe the Armenian government as a pro-business government? For example, Eric Hakopian, a CivilNet contributor, has even described Armenia's government's economic policies as Thatcherite, almost ultra-capitalist. But there are those that would have many complaints about taking that approach and would even compare it to the Armenia before the 2018 revolution, where in many ways it was a business free-for-all. Of course, there were differences, but do you think that this is an almost period of unfettered capitalism? And is that a good thing or a bad thing in your opinion?
I would like it to be unfettered capitalism, but no, I wouldn't call it Thatcherite. I think there's a long way to go. There are still some idiotic regulations that make no sense that end up harming. They sound good on paper. You can score some cheap political points that way, but they end up harming local talent and so on, and the consumer always ends up losing. So no, I don't think that it's going far enough. That said, though, I do believe this is a pro-business government. I have had meetings with Mr. Kerobian, and I came out genuinely impressed. We shared a couple books that we're reading, and his, let's say he's not some, just dumb businessman or whatever turned bureaucrat or something. I'm actually his ideas are quite well thought out from my brief meetings with him. There's a lot of positive trends in that direction. Look, at the end of the day, prosperity is our way out. I don't care what your political leanings are. If you want us to have a super strong army and be the most well-defended fortress in the Caucasus, you need an economy to do that, right? If you don't want that, and you want social welfare, you want people to not be so poor that they have to go work some crappy job in Russia, driving a taxi and being looked down on by locals over there. You want them to be comfortable in their homeland. You need an economy to do that. If you want wealth redistribution, something I'm totally categorically against, you need an economy to do that. If you want even just leisure, if you want people to live happy, well-rounded lives where they can donate to the causes that they care about, you need an economy to do that. It's the backbone of everything. Armenia's priority at this point should be to prioritize the economic growth of the country, and I would say even at the expense of other segments and other sectors. That said, I want to touch up on something. Before 2018, it was not an economic free-for-all. This is the definition of oligarchy, right? The fact is, what always produces better results for consumers? That's what I care about at the end of the day. It's the consumer, right? What always ends up producing a better result is competition. I get to compete with you, and if you're better than me, I have to find a way to either produce a cheaper service that you want to buy or a better service that you want to buy. I don't get to call my cousin sitting in the National Assembly and say, hey, someone else is trying to import concrete from Iran, let's shut this down. The fact that this isn't there anymore, right? So again, I'm not expecting this government, when I say this government is pro-business, I'm not talking about handouts, I'm not talking about even subsidies for industries, which I'm categorically against. I'm not talking about lobbying from private companies. I'm categorically against that. I'm talking about just getting out of the way. If I can go register a company within 9 minutes, keep most of what I earn, and still pay my taxes, fund this army, and use the rest of what I earn to either look after my family if I'm extremely selfish, or if I'm selfless, donate a huge chunk of what I earn to Հիմնադրամ or to any, the 1,000+ fund, and be the change that I wish to see in this country. That's all I'm expecting from this government, and so far it seems like they are moving in that direction. So in that sense, I think, yeah, it's excellent.
And in terms of the future, your own vision for the future, I mean, what do you think should be done going forward? You've spoken in the past about individual initiative. Yeah. I mean, could you speak a bit to that? And also for diasporan Armenians watching, what would your message be to them? What can they do to be part of this? Like you mentioned before, there was an expectation, especially during the war, that the diaspora would send this wave of help and stuff. Yeah. And that didn't really materialize in the way that a lot of local people thought it would. So how would you approach this question?
Look, I don't have grandiose beliefs in like this mythical cloud of the diaspora or whatever. I understand fundamentally that it always just takes 5% of the population that's crazy enough to change the culture, and the rest of the culture catches up. So we need just that 5% of people, and you're starting to see them. You mentioned NVIDIA, the vice president is an Armenian, and it was his initiative to bring it here, So you're seeing a lot more of these things, and this is going to keep happening. I think that's excellent. That said, I'm extremely hopeful about Armenia. I think like Armenia, if we have stability, in 5 years, this is going to be a totally unrecognizable country in a good way. This is going to be a more prosperous, better country to live in. This is going to be really a poster child for innovation, prosperity, reforms, and just pulling ourselves up, lifting ourselves up by the bootstraps and becoming something we can be proud of. So my message with that in mind, right, is that I think that it's everyone's individual responsibility to become a part of that change. So what this means, and for diasporans in particular, you're witnessing an influx of foreigners that I have never seen. I've been coming to Armenia since 2003 fairly regularly. And before, you would see odd foreigners here and there, and they always were married to an Armenian. That was their reason for being here. Otherwise, they wouldn't be here, right? Now, you're seeing people who are here because they genuinely want to be here, which is the first time, right? And having lived in Poland, you were seeing that over there. Being part Irish, right? It's the first time in Irish history that it's a nation now of immigrants rather than emigrants, right? People don't want to leave; they want to go there to work. I think we're starting to see that pivot now. So for Armenians, diasporans, you don't have a duty to this place. It's going to be controversial, but look, we speak a different dialect. We barely understand each other. The culture is very alien. Some people do stuff that you're like, why would you even think that this is a normal thing to do? I love this place. But that's the God's honest truth. So don't come here with rose-colored glasses thinking, I'm in my hiding. You're not. It's really, you have, other than an emotional connection, there's nothing real here. So how should you approach this place? What are the opportunities of living here? Go and take a look. Do you really want to be here? Do you want to get involved in this country? Do you want to get involved in this culture? I think, objectively speaking, even as a Westerner, yes, I'm half Armenian, but someone who's lived in 5 different countries so far, who's managed and built businesses in all 5 of those countries, coming here, I think there's so many opportunities. There's such great talent. There's such great people. And it's so easy to meet people. It's so easy to go from being at a bar, talking to someone, having a great idea, and then the following week, the company's registered, and the week after that, you have the new website. Like, executing on a new idea is so fast here, and it's so dynamic. Not to mention that, again, the quality of life, again, the social aspect of being in Armenia, the quality of the wines. I always rave about Armenian wines. It's unparalleled. But come here, check it out for yourself, and ask yourself if you really love this place. And if you do, perfect. But to me, this is much more sustainable. And if you don't want to live here, that's fine too. The government recently passed bills that you can actually invest from anywhere in the world in any of our IT startups for less than $100 without being a citizen or a resident. So you can now, again, not donate money. If you don't want to donate money, don't donate money. You can invest in some of our IT startups. You can invest in the growth of this country, and there's an abundance of amazing initiatives and projects and ideas that are taken over and pushing the boundaries and so on. So come at it from a selfish perspective, right? I like to call it just rational self-interest. Call it heart-centered capitalism, whatever you want to call it, but understand that, like, you're not. Let's remove the mythology here. This is a great place objectively. You don't need to love it because you're Armenian. Love it for real, tangible reasons.
And finally, I just want to ask, Armenia obviously is demoralized and traumatized from the 2020 war. It has 2 closed borders, one with a country that it is in active conflict with. To the north, its security guarantor, its main ally, is embroiled in a bloody war in Ukraine. To its south is a country whose economy is battered and is a theocratic dictatorship. So with all of that in mind, do you think that dissuades investors? How do investors that are foreign, that don't have that Armenian connection to Armenia, how do you think they perceive that? Do they see Armenia as this country that is a ticking time bomb, a Pandora's box, or do they not? And if so, what drives them to invest if they aren't dissuaded by that geopolitical reality?
Look, the security situation obviously is a concern for it's the top concern for anyone who's talking about Armenia. That said, this goes back to the point that I was making earlier, right? After the war, the country didn't collapse. Like we don't realize just what a massive success that was. To put into perspective, our neighbor, after they lost the first war, they descended into a country that should be as rich as the Emirates, but are not making more money than we are on a per capita basis, run by a single family that's essentially a gas station whose greatest export is corruption scandals among EU politicians. Okay, so the fact that we didn't backtrack at such a trauma for us, right? Don't forget, the first war was not live streamed. This war was live streamed. We saw what happened to our friends over there. We know what these people did when they captured them. We know. So the fact that we bore this, it's a huge indicator of the potential of this country. And I don't need to speculate either. The massive investments are already streaming into the country, and they have been for the last probably year and a half, essentially, right? Whether it's that 1.6 billion euro loan to fix our infrastructure, whether it's the new deals that we're now signing with Qatar, we just went to Bulgaria, the Greeks. They're creating this north-south highway to go all the way from India, right? The Indians are competing with the Chinese, so we have excellent relations with the Indians. So we're going to become a new conduit into the EU. The opportunities abound, and the fact that we've weathered what is possibly the worst thing to have happened to Armenia in 100 years, in the way that we have done so, I think puts tremendous confidence in foreign investors. The other thing too is that a lot of our growth is high-tech and IT oriented, right? As you know, this is the main focus of the government, right? A resource poor country in hard, tangible resources. However, in the mental resources, we're extremely strong. You can't bomb such an economy. instability can't really hit such an economy, right? Because this is literally something created out of nothing. So a lot of these investments are coming for high tech and so on, and this is the future of any global economy. So yes, I have a lot of confidence in the long-term future of this country, and I think that a lot of investors have already seen it. A lot of foreigners, and they, bigger companies and so on, who are the kind of people like NVIDIA, right? You have Oracle as well. You have a lot of these companies who are throwing you're like staggering numbers of money at Armenia, right? You're talking like tens to hundreds of millions of dollars. They're not doing this by accident. They're not sneezing and the bank account just leaked a couple million left and a couple million right. They're hedging their bets, and if they're choosing voluntarily to do this here in Armenia, that tells you they know something that most of us don't. So yeah, the opportunities here abound, and I think that from the diasporan perspective, there's so much that you can do, and you don't need a multi-million-dollar project to get started. It's the barrier for entry is very, very low. And yeah, if diasporans will not find that bigger involvement in Armenia, it's foreigners who are going to do it. It's the opportunities are there to be exploited, and they're going to, whether we like it or not. So,
Well, Patrick, thank you very much for your time. Insightful as always.
That's my pleasure.
And thank you for joining us on CivilNet.